Stop for a second and take a slow, intentional breath. What you are looking at right now is a masterfully constructed illusion. You see their freezing distance. You see their perfectly measured, stoic composure. You see the calculated way they frantically try to play it safe, keeping their cards tightly hidden against their chest, analyzing every single move they make toward you. You might even think, in your darkest moments of doubt, that they are completely uncertain about you. You might logically assume their feelings are casual, or that you are just a passing, forgettable chapter in their fast-paced life. But you are only looking at the performative surface. You are only seeing the heavily guarded perimeter of their fragile ego. Beneath that tightly controlled exterior, a massive, unstoppable psychological earthquake is taking place. They are falling. They are falling so profoundly deeper in love with you than they ever logically intended. And the most terrifying part for them is that it is completely spinning out of their control. They genuinely, arrogantly thought they had this entire situation perfectly managed. They take massive pride in their cold logic, their fierce independence, and their perceived ability to flawlessly compartmentalize heavy emotions. They built their entire identity on being the one who cares slightly less. They firmly hold the reins, safely dictating the exact pace and depth of a connection. When you first entered their life, their terrified ego immediately went to work. It frantically tried to put you in a neat, predictable, safe little box. It loudly told them, "This is just a distraction. I can step into this shallow water without getting pulled under the current." They convinced themselves they were simply observing you on their own terms. But you cannot compartmentalize a primal force of nature. What they are actively experiencing right now is the catastrophic collapse of their internal psychological architecture. Massive love, when it is profound and undeniably real, does not politely ask for permission to enter the building. It does not knock on the front door of the conscious mind and wait for clearance. It aggressively seeps through the microscopic cracks in the foundation. It floods the pitch-black basement. Right now, they are drowning in it. They are starting to realize that the boundaries they frantically drew around themselves are pathetically useless against the profound way you make them feel. And that realization is causing a silent, chaotic, suffocating panic inside their racing mind. They do not want to admit it to you, and they are aggressively fighting to avoid admitting it to themselves. Admitting that they are falling irrevocably in love with you means brutally acknowledging that they have permanently lost the upper hand. It means surrendering the heavy armor they have worn for agonizing decades to strictly protect themselves from being truly seen, from being vulnerable. They falsely associate absolute control with absolute safety. If they can control how much they feel, they falsely believe they can control how much you can potentially hurt them. But you have effortlessly bypassed all of their heavy security measures. You walked right past the heavily armed guards. You didn't do it by manipulating them, and you didn't do it by forcing your way in. You did it simply by being authentically who you are. Your pristine energy and the specific rare frequency of your beautiful soul completely disarmed them. And right now, they are paying the heavy price for letting their guard down. The absolute control they arrogantly thought they had is slipping right through their trembling fingers. It starts in the small, quiet, isolated moments that they cannot monitor. They find themselves obsessively thinking about you at completely irrational, random times. They are in the exact middle of a crowded, noisy room, supposedly engaged in a mundane conversation. And suddenly their racing mind violently pulls them right back to the precise sound of your genuine laugh. They hear a passing word, smell a highly specific scent, or clearly see a certain quality of light, and their chest tightens because it involuntarily reminds them of you. They try to focus on their work and the rigid structure of their daily routine. But you violently keep bleeding through the pages. You are aggressively interrupting their highly organized life, and they cannot hit the pause button on the racing thoughts. The fragile human mind is biologically wired to seek equilibrium, to maintain a safe state of predictable balance. But you have become their massive, chaotic imbalance. Their conscious mind, the terrified ego, is screaming at them to forcefully pull back. It is desperately flashing warning signs, loudly saying, "You are getting too close. You are risking too much." If you let this person entirely in, they will have the power to destroy you. The ego thrives entirely on toxic self-preservation, and right now, it is terrified because it knows it is losing the war. But their deeper subconscious mind, their ancient, truer self, is magnetically gravitating toward you. It profoundly recognizes you. It feels an ancient sense of safety and resonance in your presence that it has literally been searching for its entire existence. This creates a brutal, exhausting internal warfare. Half of their massive energy is spent furiously trying to build the heavy walls back up, and the exact other half is spent desperately wishing you would tear them all down. They wildly oscillate between pulling you closer and pushing you away. One day they are deeply present, incredibly warm, fully engaged, and looking at you like you are the only person on the planet. And the exact next day, they retreat. They go completely freezing cold. They become incredibly distant and overly analytical. You might logically interpret this entirely as cheap, mixed signals. You might think they are losing interest or playing cruel games with your heart. But you have to powerfully look deeper. That freezing distance is not a lack of love. That specific distance is absolute fear. Pure, unadulterated, paralyzing fear. They are pulling away exactly because they just realized how deeply they have fallen, and the sheer velocity of the fall terrified them into a strict state of temporary paralysis. They frantically try to rationalize the feeling away. They sit alone in their dark room and try to logically make lists of why this shouldn't work, why they desperately need to slow down, why they fiercely need to maintain their independence. They try to use their cold intellect to logically solve a massive emotional phenomenon. But profound love does not operate on the shallow frequency of logic. You cannot outthink a soul connection. The more they try to intellectualize their feelings for you, the infinitely more ridiculous and completely futile their pathetic efforts become. They loudly tell themselves they are just temporarily infatuated, that it is just a chemical reaction. They believe it will peacefully pass if they just give it enough time and space. But time and physical space are actively doing the exact opposite. They are acting like an incredibly powerful magnifying glass, When they are away from you, trying to actively prove that they can easily survive without your presence, the massive absence powerfully becomes incredibly, deafeningly loud. It becomes a heavy entity in the room. They brutally realize that a massive, vital, irreplaceable piece of their daily joy is missing. They realize that absolutely no one else they casually talk to understands the subtle nuances of their deep thoughts the exact way you seamlessly do. They realize that the entire world feels fundamentally duller, grayer, and vastly more boring when you are not actively participating in it with them. They frantically try to distract themselves. They throw themselves into their heavy work. They try to forcefully exhaust their physical body. They aggressively surround themselves with chaotic noise. But the exact second the noise stops, the exact second their head hits the pillow in the dark, the massive truth rises up from the depths of their psyche and stares them dead in the eyes. They are completely, hopelessly wrapped around your finger, and there is no escape route. This loss of control feels incredibly dangerous to them because it exposes the hidden parts of themselves they have spent a lifetime fiercely protecting. When you fall this deeply in love with someone, you do not just see them. You are forcefully forced to finally, brutally see yourself. You act exactly as a massive, flawless psychological mirror for them. And you are not reflecting the curated persona they show to the world. You are reflecting their dark shadow. You are reflecting their deeply buried fears of inadequacy, their starving longing to be unconditionally accepted, and the bleeding, tender parts of their fragile heart that they were brutally taught long ago to hide in order to survive. Loving you this incredibly much means they have to fiercely confront the terrifying, paralyzing possibility of being truly, nakedly known by another human being. They are utterly terrified that if they surrender to this feeling, if they bravely drop the shield and truly let you see the absolute depth of their devotion, you might look at them and coldly decide it is not enough. The raw vulnerability is excruciating. It feels exactly like standing on the terrifying edge of a massive, dizzying cliff without a parachute, knowing the only way forward is to trust you will catch them. Absolute trust is not something that comes easily to a fragile mind obsessed with total control. They desperately want guarantees. They furiously want absolute certainty. They aggressively want to clearly know exactly how the entire story seamlessly ends before they bravely allow themselves to read the first chapter. But profound love offers absolutely no guarantees, and exactly that massive unpredictability is what is driving them absolutely crazy. You can clearly see the massive cracks in their heavy armor if you know exactly where to carefully look. You can see it in the exact way their eyes profoundly soften when you casually walk into the room. A brief micro-expression of pure relief and massive joy that they frantically try to mask. You can clearly see it in the way they flawlessly remember entirely insignificant details about your life that you casually mentioned weeks ago. You can see it in the physical tension in their body when you are near, the way they magnetically lean in, the exact way their primal energy magnetically aligns with yours completely, despite their frantic conscious effort to strictly remain stoic and detached. Their physical body language is constantly betraying their fake stoicism. The body absolutely always keeps the score, and their body is screaming that you are the absolute center of their gravity. And as the massive feeling grows, exactly as the deep roots of this love dig infinitely deeper into their psychological soil, the freezing panic aggressively begins to mutate into something entirely different. It mutates into a profound, undeniable sense of absolute inevitability. They are actively starting to reach the beautiful conclusion that aggressively fighting this is completely pointless. It is exactly like desperately trying to hold back the massive tide with their bare hands. Every single agonizing time they frantically try to forcefully suppress the love, it violently rebounds with twice the sheer intensity. Every single time they desperately try to mentally distance themselves from you, they physically feel a sharp ache in their chest, a deep, heavy, pulling sensation that loudly warns them they are aggressively walking away from the absolute best thing that has ever happened to them. This massive realization is forcefully backing them into a freezing corner of their own making. They absolutely cannot go backward. The specific person they were completely before they beautifully met you absolutely no longer safely exists. That older, safer, colder version of themselves has been completely burned away by the massive intensity of what you powerfully introduced them to. But they are absolutely also utterly terrified to bravely go fully forward. Moving forward completely means boldly stepping into the wild, utterly uncontrollable, beautifully chaotic territory of absolute vulnerability. They are completely trapped in the middle, in this agonizing, beautiful purgatory of massive transition. They are violently shedding their old, rotting skin, and the entire process is profoundly uncomfortable. They are actively losing deep sleep over this, not because they are sad, but strictly because their racing mind is operating at 1,000 miles an hour. They are endlessly analyzing, desperately trying to map out a safe route entirely through this massive emotional minefield. But there is no safe route. There is absolutely only the profound surrender. They are desperately trying to creatively figure out how to safely give you their fragile heart completely without losing their entire identity. They are frantically trying to figure out how to let you be their absolute peace without making you their complete entire world. And you are casually sitting there, completely unaware of the absolute magnitude of the storm inside them. You logically think you are absolutely just a passing person they are casually dating. You absolutely do not clearly realize that you have powerfully become a monumental, life-altering psychological event in their timeline. You are the massive catalyst entirely for the greatest internal psychological shift they have absolutely ever experienced. They are intensely frustrated entirely by exactly how effortlessly you profoundly affect them. It actually makes them deeply angry sometimes. Not angry at you, but fiercely angry at their own perceived massive weakness. They get violently mad that a simple tiny shift in your tone of voice can completely ruin their entire afternoon. They get deeply frustrated that a slightly delayed text message from you can effortlessly send their brain into a dark spiral. They completely hate that their ultimate happiness is absolutely now inexplicably intertwined with your specific presence. For someone who has absolutely always heavily prided themselves entirely on fierce emotional self-sufficiency, Exactly this heavy level of deep, profound dependence physically feels exactly like a massive, critical system failure. But it is absolutely not a failure. It is a massive, profound awakening. And despite all their pathetic kicking and screaming, despite all their frantic attempts to remain detached and cool, they are slowly beginning to truly realize that this is exactly what they have always secretly wanted. Beneath the thick layers of ego, entirely beneath the fierce independence, beneath the profound fear of being consumed, is a desperate, screaming longing to be unconditionally loved exactly this incredibly much, to finally find absolutely someone whose massive energy is so undeniably powerful that it beautifully forces them to peacefully put down the heavy sword and stop fighting. You are exactly that massive person. You are the absolute one who is beautifully forcing them to finally peacefully rest, even though the entire process of truly resting physically feels utterly terrifying to a traumatized mind used to constant warfare. They are falling infinitely deeper into the absolute reality of you. They are starting to clearly look at you, absolutely, not just as a passing connection, but entirely as a permanent, absolute destination. They are starting to quietly, privately imagine a massive future that is completely shaped entirely around your specific existence. They actively catch themselves doing it, vividly picturing you entirely in their physical space. And exactly when they actively catch themselves doing this, it completely scares the absolute hell entirely out of them. It is undeniable proof that the lonely, solitary future they had carefully planned for themselves has already been completely, permanently rewritten entirely by your powerful presence. This is the exact, precise point where the fragile control finally, completely shatters. You absolutely cannot control a massive flood entirely by politely asking it to safely stop. You absolutely have to surrender and let it completely wash entirely over you. And they are currently in the profound process of being beautifully washed completely away. They are standing in the smoking wreckage of their own shattered ego, actively looking entirely around and brutally realizing exactly that everything they arrogantly thought was profoundly important, their toxic pride, their freezing emotional distance, their heavy safety mechanisms is entirely meaningless. It is meaningless compared entirely to the sheer, overwhelming truth of exactly how incredibly much they deeply love you. The massive resistance is starting to beautifully crumble. You can physically feel it entirely in the charged air completely between you. The intense moments of deep, prolonged, burning eye contact exactly where they absolutely do not look away. The profound, subtle shifts entirely in their specific language, beautifully moving entirely from I to we. They are starting to bravely volunteer heavy pieces of their vulnerable past. They are beautifully doing exactly this. Absolutely. Not because they casually want to, but entirely because they absolutely, fundamentally have to. The massive pressure of fiercely keeping the love tightly contained is violently becoming vastly more painful entirely than the terrifying risk of finally letting it entirely out. They are beautifully realizing exactly that the only way to survive this feeling is to succumb to it. And exactly that is the absolute most beautiful, utterly terrifying threshold a human being absolutely can ever cross. They are profoundly realizing that beautifully loving you exactly this deeply is absolutely not a pathetic weakness. It is the absolute bravest, most massive thing they have ever bravely done. It is the absolute ultimate act of profound psychological courage. They are beautifully choosing completely to bravely walk entirely into the massive fire. They perfectly know that they absolutely will violently be burned, but profoundly recognize exactly that the absolute fire is the exact only thing that will finally make them physically feel unconditionally warm. Absolutely do not ever underestimate the beautiful chaos you have powerfully caused entirely in their beating heart. You have completely, permanently rewired their internal psychological circuitry. You have beautifully ruined them entirely for absolutely anyone else. They deeply know exactly that absolutely, if they cowardly walk entirely away completely from exactly this, they will tragically spend the rest of their physical life desperately looking entirely for your exact flawless face entirely in every single crowd. They deeply know exactly that you are the ultimate benchmark, the absolute gold standard, the undeniable, massive high watermark completely of their entire emotional existence. And exactly so, they powerfully stay. They bravely stay entirely in the massive discomfort. They beautifully stay entirely in the terrifying, bleeding vulnerability. They powerfully stay entirely in the absolute, beautiful chaos, completely of falling completely, irrevocably, entirely out of toxic control. Exactly because the absolute only thing infinitely more terrifying entirely than violently losing their absolute control is the terrifying thought completely of absolutely ever permanently losing you. This is absolutely not a cheap casual romance. This is a profound, life-altering, massive psychological event. They are actively going entirely through the massive fire, completely of profound transformation, and you are the absolute flame. They are fiercely fighting, frantically overthinking, and violently panicking, but absolutely above entirely all else, they are beautifully falling, deeply, wildly, and profoundly permanently. There is absolutely nothing their fragile ego, their toxic pride, or their ancient fear absolutely can completely do to permanently stop it. The massive gravity completely of your beautiful soul has completely permanently captured them, and they are finally, beautifully, profoundly realizing exactly that the absolute only thing completely left entirely to do is bravely brace entirely for the massive impact and beautifully let themselves completely hit the solid ground. If this profound breakdown provided the validation you have been fiercely seeking, I want you to go down to the comments right now and boldly declare your power. Type, "I surrender to my alignment." Claim that absolute, sovereign energy entirely for your own resilient spirit. Then, please click the video appearing right here on your screen. It reveals the exact psychological boundaries you must establish to permanently protect your energy moving forward. Stay fiercely grounded, unconditionally protect your pristine peace, and keep powerfully moving forward